Welcome on in. It is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast for Thursday, September 29th. John McKechnie and Mario Puig here getting into all of the week 4 action. We even have a London game. We'll get to the Thursday night game as well. Every single game on the NFL week 4 slate. Here we go. Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. John McKechnie and Mario Puig hanging out with you. We are coming off an exciting week 3, and boy, it does feel like a lot of injuries have cropped up across the league as, the Wednesday injury reports have come out. It looks like a lot of star players are dealing with those early season bumps and bruises. So let's start things out with this Thursday night game, Mario. We have the Bengals playing host to the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins obviously coming off of an exciting victory over the Buffalo Bills. However, it was a pretty taxing win. Their defense was on the field in the heat for a ton of plays on Sunday. Now you get the quick turnaround, got to get out of Miami and go up to Cincinnati. And that I think is in large part why the Bengals are favored, despite, obviously not getting off to a great start in their own regard. But, what are your thoughts on this game, especially considering, what's going on the Miami side injury wise?
Yeah, I think you got it right. I mean, they spent so much time on the field that there's just no way, especially even if it was a full week of rest, they might have been a little bit taxed, come Sunday, let alone today. So traveling can't help. Joe Mixon's been pretty inefficient through 3 weeks, and if that doesn't change here, the Bengals have something wrong with them that I don't know if they can fix exactly. So, not to truly make a statement like if Joe Mixon has a bad game here, he's toast for the whole season. But I'm kind of it's like, man, at the very least he's kind of just whiffed on a quarter of the opportunity he was supposed to have, and in this case, maybe the prime setup yet. So I do think he gets going though, and I think the Bengals kind of take care of this. I don't know what to make of any of the injuries, really. I mean, you got a couple big ones with the Dolphins too. Not even aside from Tua and Jalen, you got a couple on the Dolphins that are pretty big. Like Terran Armstead's been playing through some toe issue, but he hasn't practiced in 2 weeks, and this is a short week this time, so maybe he's not quite himself. That would be a big problem if so. Tua, uh, with his back concussion, whatever it was that he suffered, don't know what to make of that. Don't even know if we're really getting the full story with what he's dealing with, let alone, guessing whether we can infer what's going on from what they tell us. So I don't want to assume everything's great with the Dolphins side, I guess, even though they are saying like all those guys, and Xavier Howard too is questionable. They're saying like all those guys are probably going to play. So Waddle, I feel like, has done this a few times, even last year, where he kind of has like limited practice participation and limited practice volumes, and he still seemed okay. So I guess we can expect him to be more or less himself. But the Tua part, the Armstead part, and I don't know what to make of that exactly. So yeah, I would just lean Bengals because it's a lot working against the Dolphins at the moment, I think.
So how would the Bengals have to adjust their game plan in order to kind of escape this one with a victory? Because it does feel like we've kind of established here that the chips are stacked against them, be it the personnel and then also just the timing coming off of a game like the one that they just played on Sunday. Like, it just doesn't feel like they're built to necessarily keep the Bengals offense on the sidelines by like sustaining these long drives. Like, I think what's great about Miami is their ability to, have the big plays, the quick strike type of offense. But, at the same time, I don't think that they can sustain those, like 10, 12 play drives that eat up some clock and keep Joe Burrow and company on the sideline.
Yeah, road games, short weeks, as the temperatures drop over time. That's all going to be working against the Dolphins' offense, despite their fast start. And I know they're a warm weather team, so at home it won't be a problem. But uh, they're lucky that this game is now actually not so much on a Thursday, but early in the year. They're lucky they're getting this game, because if it was a month from now, I feel like that's a much worse projection. Like as the temperature drops, as wind goes up, this Tua dependent offense, this system where they're dependent on Tua for ball control, like that just isn't gonna play in the playoffs or the cold weather. So I think we can kind of expect them to start faster than they finish. And I don't know how they're going to make any. If that happens, I don't know how they're going to pick up the slack with the ground game. Like I just don't see the personnel there. They're relying on Raheem Mostert to kind of be like their between the tackles runner, which is not going to work. It hasn't worked yet, and it's like they're going to break him if they keep doing that. So
Mm.
they're on track, I think, to end up with Chase Edmonds as their only healthy running back within a few weeks. And if they have a 3rd and 1, it's like, well, hell, you might as well throw to Tyreek deep. I mean, what's the point? You're not moving the chains with these guys. So I would have I would have thought they'd add like a Jordan Howard kind of guy by now because they're going to sort of need one, whether they realize it yet or not. In this game, though, um, I don't know. I don't know what the Dolphins do differently. You know, it's like they're just dependent on Tyreek and Waddle to move the ball. Those running backs can't really do it, so they have to just keep doing what they've been doing and hope it keeps working. On the Bengals side, they just got to not turn the ball over, basically. Like let those Dolphins defenders get gassed by keeping them on the field as much as possible, and then second half, P Ryan and Mixon should be able to just stomp all over them.
And with the Bengals, and I think it's going to be an issue for them all season. We saw it through the first 2 weeks when they face an elite pass rush. It can really mess up the entire operation for them. Obviously, going up against the Jets last week, that was the perfect kind of get right spot for them. Are the Bengals are the Dolphins able to bring anything off the edge pressure wise that could kind of foul things up for this Bengals passing game?
Well, Jalen Phillips had a pretty good year pass rushing last year. I want to say he had like 8.5 sacks on like 550 snaps or something like that. And he doesn't have a sack yet. So, based on prior rates of per snap production, he's a pretty good bet to get at least one sack in this one. I just don't know if it's going to be the kind of sack that is it going to be? Is it taking the Bengals from 2nd and 1 to 3rd and 6, or is it taking them from 2nd and 10 to 3rd and 16? The second one is how you really start to lay a beating on an offense. But I think it might be more like the first one. Like I think whatever heat Burrow gets in this game, it's more likely to be in situations where they can kind of like shake it off, even if it's a sack, even if they don't complete the pass and move the chains. It's like the cost of that won't be what it's been in these first few weeks. Like they'll be able to get away with it. Although again, I'm assuming that the ground game is way better than it's been. So that's kind of what I keep going back to that point because it's just I think whatever goes wrong with the Bengals, it's going to be going wrong in parts of the field and in situations that just are more advantageous to them. Like it's not gonna be like that Pittsburgh game where everything that went wrong was like a back-breaking event. It's going to be more like they can kind of just slick it off and keep going, keep giving it to Mixon, and especially if Tua is anything less than sharp in this one, I just don't think the Bengals need to play with much urgency.
Right. So, looking at that and, the potential for slower drives on the Bengals side, the 48 and a half or 47 and a half, depending on where you're looking for the total. Do you think with everything that we've kind of laid out here that maybe this game's coming in under that?
Um, I don't know. I have no good sense of picking over unders. I guess I should say, but
Oh,
it's
I don't either.
what
I
gives me a
went back and
special
looked at my
pause
record from
though.
last week and
Just having just having guys like Hill's also due to go off. Like Hill, if he has a big game, then it's like whatever is a big game for Tyreek is the kind of production that can just sort of flip a game. Either flip it from its current momentum or just take it over entirely. So it's like the Bengals could pummel them for 3 quarters, and the Dolphins could still get 14 points in the last 10 minutes or something like that. So it's like the one team I don't want to pick the under against, even though
Mhm.
maybe it's the one time I want to pick it against them.
Right. No, that definitely makes sense. I'd probably try to stay away from betting the total in this one as well. Let's get on over to foggy London town as we begin the Sunday slate breakdown. We got the Vikings going up against the Saints. This game not New Orleans, no home field advantage for the New Orleans Saints, despite them being the home team in this matchup. Vikings slight favorites in this one. I mean, Have the Saints really like played any kind of sustained good brand of football thus far this season? I mean, other than kind of mucking things up against the Buccaneers early on and then making the comeback against the Falcons, I felt like last week it was kind of a bigger indication of where they are. And I don't think the Vikings are great necessarily, but ooh, man, I think this Saints team is ticketed for potentially a top 10 pick, especially with the injuries they've got in the quarterback room.
Yeah, Jameis not practicing today, and I don't want to misquote the guy, but I thought Dennis Allen said he thought Winston would practice today, so I don't know if that marks some sort of escalating concern or whatever. It was concerning enough, just Jameis Winston with broken back or back fractures, multiple back fractures. It's like
Hmm.
we barely able to work up the courage to go with him when he's completely healthy. It's like you don't need that part put in. Uh, if we got Andy Dalton at quarterback, that's kind of just a wrap right there. I do think that the Vikings have some pretty substantial issues to work out themselves. Like I don't think they have any. Like as much as the Saints have been kind of like you pointed out, it's not sustainable the way they've been uh, getting done whatever they have gotten done. Uh, the Vikings there's something just wrong about them too. Like I'm not convinced of their defensive direction, and that's not as important as the offense. But the offense too. Uh, Aaron Glenn had Kevin O'Connell in hell last week. Like I know, I'm not just trying to take credit from Jeff Okuda or whatever, but um, those DBs were on those receivers every step that they took. Adam Thielen wasn't getting open. KJ Osborne wasn't getting open. Justin Jefferson obviously wasn't getting open. It wasn't just Okuda that was the thing determining who was covered on a play. He wasn't covering everybody. And yeah, I know Amani Oruwariye must have set a record for the most penalties ever against a defensive back in a single game. But even if we say it's like, oh well, the Vikings were just getting like manhandled by the corners. The refs weren't throwing a flag. Most of the time when they're getting some flags, like, they already got six on Oruwariye alone. So it's like holding a lot, getting away with it a little, whatever. It more so was the case that the lines just were on them. And they don't have the personnel to explain that. Let's just say Okuda explains his own part. The other two, it doesn't explain. The explanation is O'Connell was figured out. O'Connell was doing too many things that the Lions knew about, and the Lions were on it. So if you want to play, the kind of football where the opponent and everybody in the world has your whole playbook, that Zach Taylor style of offense, you better have a massive personnel advantage over the team you're going against. And I would say last week was an example of them having a massive personnel advantage and still not being able to do anything with it. So
Hmm.
this could be an ugly game. I imagine, does London have a certain like how Thursday games, whatever, short week games tend to make low scoring games?
Yeah,
Is
the
there?
under had hit. It was 1-1 last year, and before that, in the last 10, it was 7-3 to the under.
Yeah, this could be a really disgusting game. Yeah, I don't know what gives. I don't know. Something's got to break, I guess. Something's got to give, but I don't know what it is. Maybe both defenses get gassed or something, and then maybe Kirk Cousins gets enough going late to kind of eke out a win, but it doesn't feel like anyone's really going to seize victory here.
No, it'll be the doing of the losing team that kind of determines the result in this one. So, do we expect a bounce back from the likes of Justin Jefferson? And what do you do if you have Dalvin Cook? He obviously did not practice this past Wednesday due to that shoulder issue that we've talked about previously. Definitely has had plenty of those in his history.
Yeah, it's a weird thing with Dalvin because it's like his shoulder is glass, but it's the kind of glass that for some reason seems to glue back together within a week or 10 days every time. It's like every time he gets the injury, he's popped for the game. But then, instead of ending up on IR or whatever, or needing like surgery on the shoulder, I guess he probably needs surgery on the shoulder, but just isn't getting it. So he's gonna keep coming back in 5 to 10 days from shoulder separations over and over, chronic shoulder separations, and just like lose the ability to lift his hand over his head by the time he's 40 instead of getting shoulder surgery now. Um, I guess he's gonna play. Like he's not. It seems like he's not supposed to. Like the last year when it was the Steelers or something, he had that He had his
Mhm.
biggest game of the year in a situation where doctors conventionally would have been like, yeah, you can't play. So I would guess he plays therefore. Like, why would it be worse now? I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe there's something I don't know about it, but I would assume Dalvin plays and Madison. It's not the setup obviously that he's if he would have been like a starter, but or if he is a starter, but the Dalvin re-injury risk is real too. Just because that Steelers game happened doesn't mean it would happen the other 9 times out of 10. Like for all we know, the other 9 times out of 10, it's like he gets popped in the second quarter and has to leave again or something. So Madison is closer to the field than he was before the injury, but it still seems like it's Cook's. They're if the same as last year happens, it should still be Cook anyway. Justin Jefferson, I am worried about because again the Lions knew the plays last week, and the Saints are going to know the plays this week unless O'Connell figured out what he was tipping off. But um, Justin Jefferson is so good, and the target volume is still so high that it's like even if it's got to be ugly, he'll find a way to get through eventually. He's not going to finish the year with like 7.2 yards a target.
No, no. So it'll come back. But yes, still some overall concerns. That week one was so dizzying that I think that there's kind of like an almost unfair expectation that he just simply does that every week, and that
How
it's
screwed is
hard
the
to do.
Packers defense? They
Yeah.
they got pants by O'Connell, and now O'Connell just looks like another Zach Taylor after 1 week. So
Ugh.
we'll see.
And then, on the New Orleans side, if it is Andy Dalton, I think that Chris Olave has kind of put himself on the radar to start in just kind of
It
conventional
was a good
12
run,
teamers.
John.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I'll remember it fondly.
those Olave Rookie of the Year tickets sure as hell aren't happening. Maybe one game of Dalton he can survive, but what are we gonna? Is Jameis Winston's multiple back fractures gonna be substantially better in a week? He just needed a week off for his and multiple points broken back to heal? Doesn't seem like it's a good way out. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. Maybe if he's sleeping in like a hyperbaric chamber, maybe. But even then, I don't know. Jameis has all those cool exercise videos. Maybe those are going to help. I'm not totally sure, but
I'm
either
sure he's
way,
got a great idea, whatever it is.
just like someone chasing him around. And then let's see here. When it comes to Alvin Kamara, limited on Wednesday. Imagine he's just going to be one of those guys this year that is limited a lot, but plays a lot. But your expectations on him after rushing for 60 yards this past week?
I don't know what's a fair expectation with him, really. I mean that those ribs gotta hurt. Um, I guess you like it to be maybe his best game of the year. It's just to this point, it's just that's not saying anything at all. So, uh, yeah, he's got to do okay here. I'd be surprised if he's a dud or whatever, but not vintage Kamara either. It's more like the slog kind maybe that we saw early last year, where he was getting like 20 carries for 80 yards and a touchdown kind of thing.
Do you think he breaks out of that eventually, or is this going to kind of be the Kamara season?
I think he'll get out eventually. I just don't. It's tough to tell where he's at in his career, by conventional metrics, because it's like 27, he just turned 27. It's like that's not truly old, but he's not a big running back either, and he's had a pretty sizable workload at this point, like especially last year, getting 240 carries in 13 games was kind of ill-advised, I think. Uh, Not that it would explain anything about where he's at. I just mean like that kind of body type you don't want to make him a workhorse. You want to make him a guy who does a lot of damage on a modest workload. It just suits him best, and it prolongs his career the best. So the way they were using him last year is like more the way you should use like a Mark Ingram kind of like between the tackles guy. Like that just it doesn't really help him, and it actually might have taken a toll on him. He might be, for his body type, the kind of workload that he's taken, he might be aged more like 30 than 27, So he might actually be closer to decline than we'd like to think about. And if that's at all in play, then it would be, certainly a new development, something that has never been the case with him before. Like whatever else has gone on with Kamara, system product to some extent or not, he's always been elite for his own part too. So if he's now just some kind of pretty good and the offense sucks too, like that's kind of a lot working against him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that's a good way to frame that. We're going to grab a couple questions here in a second, but first, a message from our friends over at Blue Wire. Okay, let's see here. So no one is asking, would you trade away Jalen Hurts for Justin Jefferson if you had Tom Brady as your backup quarterback? If the other
Yeah.
person is willing to take Jalen Hurts in exchange for Justin Jefferson, then yes, go
Yeah, I
ahead
would do
and
that.
take that one.
Actually, though, I'd try to really squeeze the most out of this Hurts hype and get a little greedy and see if you can maybe get a little more out of them because I bet you might be able to. I know that it's just the Jefferson optics are so ugly, and I think people are going to do this thing where they're like, "Oh, Jalen Hurts can be like Lamar," and he's not. The system is helpful, but it's going to get more stressful than he's seen so far. And when the stress hit last year, he folded pretty much every time.
True, true, and even if he doesn't fold this time in the face of those adjustments, I still think it's going to be almost impossible to sustain the kind of level that him and the Eagles offense are at right now. So that's a good call, just on capitalizing on momentum in the trade market. Let's get on over. We got Falcons, Browns. Browns slight road favorites here. The number was a decent bit higher earlier in the week. The Browns were like 2.5 point favorites. Now it's down to 1.5 as they go up against Atlanta. Atlanta coming off of that game out in Seattle, and the Browns having played that ugly game last Thursday night, kind of already kind of washed from our memory against the Steelers. So your thoughts on this one? I feel like this sets up pretty well for the Browns personally, but we'll get into it. So your thoughts here?
Yeah, it definitely sets up well for the Browns. Getting a little bit of extra rest, and the Falcons probably wore themselves out a little tiny bit traveling out west as they did, and uh, close game, hard fought game. They might be in a place psychologically that they're not used to, and there's a sort of fatigue risk with that. Um, I guess I was so worried about Nick Chubb having a lot of the valuable touches taken by Kareem Hunt, and that basically causing a big gap between real life Nick Chubb and fantasy Nick Chubb. Because in real life, obviously, he's just probably the best, and in fantasy, people barely care about him outside of DFS slates. So it's setting up though to be a year where there actually isn't a big gap between real life Chubb and fantasy Chubb. It's like they're getting him a lot of that work right now, even with Kareem Hunt getting a pretty big workload. So maybe that changes after the Watson suspension expires. But right now, it seems like the model is there's slack for both Chubb and Hunt. And in a setting like this, that suits them perfectly well. I mean, it's just kind of like they have to take a layup this week. On offense, anyway, they do. On defense, they might be a little challenged. I don't know. I just hate the results Joe Woods gets. I don't have any specific criticisms to make of the guy, but I think it's only because I haven't watched that closely and I haven't tried to. But I feel like there's a big disconnect between the results Joe Woods, the Cleveland defensive coordinator, gets, especially from those corners. Like I don't know how there's so many open receivers against this defense when you have Denzel Ward. Maybe just Ward's overrated, and I'm like maybe that's my error in the thinking there. But in any case, these corners have not gotten the results that you would expect them to. This past defense hasn't gotten the results you'd expect it to. The run defense personnel is trash, so I think they got to worry about that just categorically, no matter who they're going against. Going against Arthur Smith, if he has those Falcons ready to play, like that's dangerous for the Cleveland run defense. And even if Denzel Ward's good, even if Greg Newsom's good, those two match up pretty poorly with a guy like Drake London. I mean, no one
Right.
really matches up that great with Drake London, kind of why he is the way he is. But those corners are tiny, or at least Ward is tiny, and Newsom's like maybe average size. So London could kind of keep it going pretty well here. I didn't think he'd start this fast, and I guess there's a little bit of like touchdown dependency in his production so far. But if they get into scoring range and they're throwing a touchdown, it's either London or Pitts. And so far, understandably enough, Pitts seems to get a lot of defensive attention. And if you're a defensive coordinator, you probably would say, yeah, we'd rather lose by London than lose by Pitts. So that could keep going on here. And if London's on even a really good corner, even if Denzel Ward is a really good corner, being a 5'11", 185 or whatever he is, it's just not easy to go against a 6'4", 220 type like London. So I think the Falcons offense can keep it going. I don't know what their defense can do here.
And then is a game like last week kind of how Cleveland has to win it, where the other offense kind of fails, and then with their own part on offense is kind of having those long sustained, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt driven type of offensive sequences, and can that carry over in this spot against Atlanta?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting because you don't see an offense deliberately built like the Browns' offense is built. They're pretty clearly they're kind of acknowledging in the design, like, yeah, we can't throw, so we're going to very specifically dial up our targets that we somewhat selectively put out in the first place. Like, we're not going to try to run up 40 pass attempts on you. We're going to try to throw it 25 to 28 times. And as many of those pass attempts as possible, we want to be like dialed up, sort of scripted targets. And in this case, which is to say, we want like 45-50% of those targets going to Amari Cooper, and we want it to go to him on those plays because the entire scheme, the entire theory of the play design is specifically to free him up. And it's usually like it's like playing off of some look that they gave them in the ground game 3 times on the drive already. It's like it's setting up to be an off tackle Chubb carry, and you get your personnel on defense kind of leaning that way because you already saw it and you're sick of getting beat on that play. And then it ends up being a little bit different, and the routes are set up to free up just a quick opening for Cooper, and bam, another first down, and you kind of just keep doing that until you get to the end zone. And it worked last week. The Falcons defense has overachieved. I don't know if they can keep it up. I mean, it's Dean Pease, I think, the defensive coordinator, and he's one of those old Baltimore guys too. So he knows a lot of tricks. He can do that kind of like Wink Martindale kind of stuff. So I can imagine them keep on overachieving, but they really are overachieving, and I don't know if you can really you can't like smoke and mirror your way out of the problem of Nick Chubb being a hulking, really fast human.
Yeah, at a certain point, like there isn't a trick in the bag to really stop that, other than getting up there and having the Montana State rookie try to tackle Nick Chubb in
Was that
open
who's?
space.
Oh man, I didn't even notice he was playing already.
I,
Trey Anderson.
he had the punt block against the
Okay.
Rams.
Yeah, if he's on the field, like that guy doesn't really know how to play line. Like he's not even supposed to yet. So if he's out there, that's just like Chubb. It doesn't apply position analogy wise, but he's definitely thinking what D'Angelo from The Wire as the kicker in The Waterboy says his onside kick.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
There he is.
Strong reference. Love that. Let's see. Anything else to get from this game? Obviously, I think you're starting Cordell Patterson without thinking twice about it at this point. But like, how high do you have him kind of ranked, projected for this week? Is he like a high end RB2 at this point?
I guess so, but I didn't even see his season going like this at all. I thought he'd have like 8 carries a game for like whatever 40 yards, maybe 4 or 5 rushing touchdowns, and I thought he'd have like 400 to 600 yards receiving, something like that. And he's been just like a bruiser, like a pure runner so far. So that's impressive on the one hand, but I don't think it's the most sustainable thing for him. On the other, I'd kind of like to see them throw more in general if they could, and get Patterson some targets so that he's not running between the tackles so much. Like he's a high runner. He's like 6'2" or something. So you can't keep doing that with him.
Yeah, we'll see how that usage changes, but obviously anyone that invested in him, especially where he did, I know you
He
got
can
a lot of
run.
him in best ball.
People
I mean,
really
he's looked great.
People convince themselves that he couldn't run. It's like, man, maybe the Falcons suck, maybe he gets hurt or whatever, but he can run.
He absolutely can. So impressive stuff from him to start this year. Game got a message from our friends over at BroThrow. Have you ever bet on sports with your buddies? BroThrow is the only sports betting platform that lets you bet directly with your friends, and BroThrow doesn't take a cut of every bet. No fees, no juice, no middlemen. BroThrow is not a sports book. You bet on sports directly against other users with no juice or vig, which saves you a ton of money over time. Betting $11 to win 10 stinks. With BroThrow, you bet $10 and win $10. BroThrow offers a hassle-free sign-up process that lets you get in the action in seconds. And you don't have to deposit money on BroThrow either. Instead, you pay other bettors directly. Throw out your first bet and go to brothrow.com/roto and use code ROTO. That's brothrow.com/ROTO. BroThrow is free to sign up. Cut out the middleman and start betting on BroThrow. That's brothrow.com/ROTO. And we also got a message from our friends over at Vivid Seats. Hey, football fans, get your jerseys on and your tailgate snacks ready. That's right. NFL season is back, and so is your chance to score tickets with Vivid Seats. Download the Vivid Seats app or visit vividseats.com to see your team's schedule, compare tickets, and secure your spot in the stands. As the only ticketing company with a reward program, Vivid Seats is the winning app for NFL fans like you. Earn credit when you buy 10 tickets, then cash it in to catch more games all season long. With tickets from Vivid Seats, you'll go from watching the game to being a part of it. Go to vividseats.com or find us in the App Store to browse unbeatable seats. We'll see you in the stadium. All right, let's get things rolling here. We got Ravens playing host to the Buffalo Bills. Your thoughts here? The Bills road favorites in this one, obviously coming off their first loss of the season. We talked about the Miami game earlier when we were talking Thursday night football, and then the Ravens coming off the win in New England. Is this just the way that the Ravens are going to have to get used to playing here, where they can give up a lot of points even to teams like the Patriots, and they're just going to have to outscore everybody?
I guess Michael Pierce out now too, so I I don't know, man. I've been kind of frustrated with a lot of the personnel decisions that the Ravens had made lately, and each the last 2 years I've gone in thinking like I don't really like the way this defense looks, and then but in each case too, I was kind of like, oh, but they always figure it out. I'm sure they'll figure it out. They always do, and they haven't really. Granted, there's also been the injuries at corner, but it's like it's basically just been Humphrey because Peters they knew was hurt, so
Mm-hmm.
that's not really an excuse. I don't know. I don't see how they fix it really, or at the very least, I no longer have that generous assumption that I used to make that like, oh, they always figure it out. I'm sure they're on it. Like now, I'm like, I don't know if they're even on it. So I'm not hopeful that their defense improves. And on offense, I don't think it's sustainable what they've been doing. I mean, Lamar Jackson is awesome. You don't no one needs to convince me that, but Greg Roman is still their offensive coordinator, and successful or not in these first 3 weeks, it's always box scores like they play 38 snaps, they play 42 snaps, and Lamar Jackson gets them 5 touchdowns on 26 usage reps,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like that is Lamar, and he will do that. But I feel like what we're seeing right now is what they do in spite of Roman, and they need to change a few things for this to be sustainable because Lamar is not going to be able to average like 15 yards a pass and 20 yards a carry all year. So when that changes, what changes to offset that? And I don't know what the answer would be for the Ravens if not like the running backs step up basically.
Yeah,
And it's like
that would
yeah,
have to be the answer in my opinion.
it's
And
like
obviously,
Dobbins. I don't know where he's at. I don't know where Gus Edwards is at. But if those two can't save the day, they don't have an answer. So uh, in this particular matchup, I don't know what to make either. I mean, it's kind of funny. Like we were talking about how the Dolphins defense was on the field so much. I almost have to wonder if the Buffalo offense is tired after spending 90 snaps on the field. I mean, it probably isn't, but it's or at least it's not as taxing to play offense as it is defense, especially in the trenches. So I'm sure they'll be fine. But man, they spent a lot of time spinning their wheels last week and going nowhere. I guess I guess I wouldn't expect that to be an issue against this Ravens defense. Although I guess going to Baltimore generally has been pretty harsh on teams
yes.
historically. I don't know if that's I don't know if Allen's really at risk of that. It might be kind of like the Arrowhead thing where we were like, man, quarterbacks just hate going to Arrowhead, and then it turned out like, oh, actually, it's just the ball dies when you go to Arrowhead, and if you have a Herbert, Mahomes, Josh Allen arm, that doesn't actually affect them that much. Like maybe the Ravens have a similar thing, and maybe Allen's arm strength makes him immune to it. I don't really know, but I'm not particularly worried about the Bills' offense in this one. I might be worried about the Ravens' offense just because the Bills defense is so much better than the Ravens defense. But also on the other hand, I don't know. I'm not gonna just bet against Lamar Jackson exactly. I don't know. I am worried for the Ravens in this one though.
So is Devin Duvernay someone that you can feel okay starting in deeper formats? And are you starting Rashad Bateman, without thinking twice about it at this point?
So Duvernay is one of those parts that's not sustainable too. Whereas I feel like Bateman's production, like it's not sustainable in the sense that yeah, he's not going to average 25 yards a catch, but his target volume is certain to go up, and the
Hmm.
Ravens are certain to run more snaps. Like I said, they played like 40 snaps a game so far. It's like they get on the field, they strike, and then the defense sits on the field all game,
Yep.
and that you know would 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 change here, or assuming they're having any success, that will change here because they'll have to. They won't score every 4 plays. Basically, that's not going to keep happening. The way that they get the same snap counts is more likely like they just do so badly they never get a first down and have to keep giving the ball back. So that's the only way that snap count stays so low, and that's the main reason Bateman's volume has been low. But it will go up eventually when the snaps do. I don't know if Duvernay is. I don't know if the same is true with him. I feel like he's more like in a fixed volume kind of scenario where if they play a lot more snaps, he's not guaranteed to get a lot more usage. But I think he's good. I think he's clearly the real deal. I think the extent to which he is limited is just the extent to which Roman is failing in his job. But I think Roman will do that. He always has. I don't have any reason to think he'll stop. So Duvernay is mostly just a deep league guy, whereas with Bateman, you definitely assume that he gets more volume going forward.
And then just rounding it out, when it comes to the Bills here, I just feel like their offense is set up so well to do well against this defense. Like, the Ravens needed some turnovers, some, absolute terrible interceptions from Mac Jones a week ago. Kyle Hamilton, had to chase someone down to force that fumble. Obviously, like that was a good thing that happened, but you don't like the events leading up to it where you got a receiver just kind of streaking across open. And I just feel like the Ravens pass rush problem is another thing that's not going to get fixed. And when you have Josh Allen sitting back there with time to operate, I think it spells disaster for this team. So I do like the Bills a decent bit in this one, despite, history saying that, Baltimore's a tough place to go in and win.
Yeah, I will say it'll be interesting to see if the Dolphins of all teams showed something about how to counter this Bills offense because they basically forced or convinced anyway the Bills to just spam running back targets. Like they must have had like 20, 22 running back targets, which is not normally how they work. And it shows that the Dolphins were taking away something vertically because they wanted to go to Diggs, they wanted to go to Davis maybe, and it wasn't there. And then you could see like almost a point in the game where Ken Dorsey's like, all right, well, we're going to throw to the running backs then. So I'm curious, like, what did the Dolphins do to make the Bills decide, let's voluntarily take Diggs and get Davis out of the game and try to replace them as pass catchers with Devin Singletary of all people. And I guess James Cook and Moss also got in there a little bit. Devin Singletary catching like 8 passes is a loss for the Bills offense. They can't let that
Mm-hmm.
happen. So it's interesting that the Dolphins convinced them to do it.
No, yeah, that's a really interesting detail. And then, kind of marrying it up between these two units, the Bills just don't seem like they're going to be able to run the ball at all this year. The Ravens don't really feel like they're going to be able to stop it, but I just don't think that their run defense is going to matter in this one necessarily. But I think it still is a concern moving forward. The new defensive coordinator and Harbaugh were talking about the lack of run fits, and that kind of led to the Patriots running it kind of all over them. I don't think the Bills do that, but I think it's something to monitor when the Ravens face good run teams like the Browns.
Yeah, and if they keep using Singletary that way, then needless to say, that's an insane boost to his value.
Yeah, that just oh my gosh, the reason why people would hate PPR scoring, basically. Let's keep things going here. We got Commanders Cowboys. Commanders 3-point underdogs on the road going up against Cooper Rush and the Dallas Cowboys. Cowboys played an ugly game on Monday. It wasn't as ugly as the Sunday night game. That I'm still like angry at myself for spending 3.5 hours watching that on Sunday night. But now that Monday was a whole lot better. But yeah, Dallas, I think you established this point last week where when it is just Cooper Rush back there, it's obviously not a high ceiling team, but you can totally see the talent elsewhere, like on the field for this Cowboys team, whether it's out wide, whether it's the defense is just kind of crazy, especially in the front seven. The offensive line is all right. It's maybe not as good as it was a couple years ago, but still definitely good. Zeke has looked all right, and Tony Pollard obviously looked good this past week. So there's just kind of like enough on aggregate there to where I do trust the Cowboys with Cooper Rush at home against Carson Wentz.
Yeah, after week one, I would have assumed that Washington would clean up this game, but
Mm-hmm.
apparently unstoppable Carson Wentz was only a 1 week deal, and he became more like the Carson Wentz we know and love last week. Uh, it's weird. It's tough for me to think through Wentz because it's like he's got all this natural talent and he can make great plays, but he's just psychologically weak. Like he'll go into a setting like that Jacksonville game and he'll play loose and he'll be like, all of a sudden he's just this 6'5", 230-pound guy who can throw the football as far as he wants. And then he goes against his former team last week. And maybe John Gannon had a good game plan. I don't know. I kind of doubt it, but whatever. I think even if Gannon had a good game plan, the result can only be explained by Carson Wentz just choking. He got there and he was like, on some deep level, deep in his soul, he knew I don't want this smoke. But his whole persona is being like this. Oh yeah, I want to get back on the field, coach. I want to prove my doubters wrong. And it's like he's got like this frail narcissism working against him, where he both wants the spotlight and is also afraid of it. And it means like it's just difficult to tell which version of him is ever going to show up. And I thought after week one, I was like, oh God, Carson Wentz. My nightmare scenario, Carson Wentz is just elite now because he's got these three receivers. It's like, I guess not quite that the case, but he can make some plays against Dallas. I think he'll have a better game here than he did against. Like he's not, his frail narcissism is not going to be threatened by the Cowboys the way that going against this former team, the Eagles, did. So I think he's going to be a little more loose in this setting. And there's nothing about the Cowboys secondary that's scary for these receivers. Quite the other way around. It's like Dallas might even need to take a little bit off of their pass rushing ambitions to properly manage these three route runners that are so dangerous for Washington. But I guess I'd go with the Cowboys to win because their pass rush is so good and it's so varied. It's just, they got so many guys. It's like outside of that Quinton Bohannon one, it's like everybody's a runner. Like everybody can pursue in the open field. Everybody can split gaps. It's just so much speed, and I think they're gonna get to every quarterback they face basically. And the question is like, will the quarterback keep it together and make the throws that are available, or will they let those 3 to 4 sacks, 6 to 8 hits rattle them? And I don't know. I on the other side, I guess I should say too, Cooper Rush. Man, he's got such a bad arm, but he's playing really well. I mean, he seems not like great accuracy, but I haven't seen him. I can't remember seeing him make like a single bad decision. It's like he seems
Yeah.
to like he needs to be perfect with his decision making, but he has been too. So I don't know. I mean, it's like we would consider Wentz the better quarterback, but I don't know if Washington gets a better quarterback outcome in this game. And if I don't think their defense bridges that gap, and I definitely don't, and I guess I have to go with Dallas, even though I don't really know how I think it'll look exactly.
Yeah, I definitely like Dallas in this spot as well. I can see Carson Wentz not only getting, pressured that Dallas creates for him, but no one can run into a sack quite like Carson Wentz. So I expect to see plenty of that on Sunday. Lions, Seahawks, Lions 4-point favorites in this one. The Lions, unfortunately, kind of escaped last week, not only with a loss, but also a decent amount of injuries, whether it's to DeAndre Swift or Amon St. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, like one of the heroes of the early part of the season. Now he's dinged up. So, what do you do with the Lions covering 4 points at home against the Seattle team?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, granted, I'm biased because I'm obviously a Rashad Penny investor and generally a fan of his. But I think the Seahawks pretty clearly lost against the Falcons because they didn't run enough. And I thought they should have lost in week one because they didn't run enough. And I'm surprised that 2 out of the first 3 weeks the Seahawks lost or should have lost because they didn't run enough. I thought that was the last possibility with Pete Carroll running the show, especially with Russell Wilson gone. But everything they were saying about Russell Wilson limiting the offense was true. It's like they didn't want to only throw the ball 27 times a game. It's just that they thought that Russell Wilson was a liability for basically, attempts 27 through 38 or whatever Gino's been throwing. Those are all slants and like crossers and things over the intermediate part of the middle of the field that Russell Wilson just couldn't or would not throw to. So that low pass attempt volume they had with Wilson was just because they completely they forfeited that one category of play structure, and now they're running it with Gino. But like, man, you guys were running the ball well against the Broncos, and you should have lost, but you got bailed out by Nate Hackett. And then in week three, you didn't get bailed out by Nate Hackett, so you lost, and when you
Mm-hmm.
pulled the exact same stunts. And it's like I am surprised that we're in this place in the first place, but I also would be shocked if Pete Carroll looked at those results and couldn't figure it out, especially given his kind of, ideological inclinations. I think it's like usually he wants to find a reason to run the ball more, and it's here there's a big fat one right in front of him. So if they get going on the ground with Penny, I think Penny's the category of player. Like you get him over 18 carries, for the defense, you're at serious risk of giving up a 50-yarder any second. And if they get him there, I think that happens. If they don't, I think they lose for sure. Whereas, I'm not saying they win if they get Penny 20 carries, but I think they definitely lose if they don't. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so I don't know. The Lions' offense should be fine without Swift, though.
Yeah. So, you starting in leagues where you have them or stashed them, picked them up, what have you? Assuming again that Swift is inactive this week, Jamal Williams starting him in the flex pretty easily.
Yeah, I mean, he was a flex player even when Swift is healthy. So it's one of those things like he doesn't gain that much with Swift out. It's not like Williams was like a 20 carry, 6 catch, mega running back waiting to break out. It's like he's kind of maxed out as it is, but he has no real competition for like high value touches now.
Exactly. Yeah, he was already getting the goal line work even pre Swift injury. And then as far as the receivers go, if Amon-Ra St. Brown is out, I know Josh Reynolds left last game a little bit gimpy as well.
Yeah,
Is this like a Hawkinson week, or where else do
Hawkinson's
the
hurt
targets
too.
go?
Yeah,
Oh my God, their
maybe I
pets'
shouldn't
heads
have
are
been
falling off.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have been so quick to assume the Lions offense will be okay. Maybe they're just too battered to be themselves right now. Um, yeah, I don't know how it would look. I mean, what the hell? They got this is a scenario where I have to give the disclaimer because I think Quintez Cephas is actually quite good, but limited, of course, but still quite good. So I think he can step up here if they need him to. And hell, even Khalif Raymond was passable as kind of like a starter level player for them last year. And going into this year with him as the wide receiver 5, it's like it's it's uh it's the progression of a good team. He went from a player that they need all the time to a player they only need in a situation like this one, and maybe they have just enough depth to do it. I don't know. As long as that offensive line keeps playing the way it generally does, I think that's more important than any of the other parts.
I believe so as well. Good point. Let's keep it rolling. Let's get on over to our next game. We got Chargers, Texans. Texans 5.5 point dogs at home. The Texans lost to the Chicago Bears. That reaches inexcusable
The
territory, in
team
my
that's
opinion.
trying to lose beat you.
Yeah, so that is no bueno from them, even though it was on the road, and they hung around till the very end. Still, but not particularly encouraging. And then on the Chargers side, they got housed. They got completely housed, and I think that at once is a statement that Jacksonville is no longer the bottom feeder than it was a year ago. Uh, but at the same time, I think it also just kind of pointed to some problems with the Chargers, whether it is Justin Herbert
They
playing
suck.
through something that's tough. They are injured, in a lot of spots. But like Austin, you would think with Herbert being dinged up the way he is, it would be a great spot for Eckler. And no, I mean, they were playing catch up the whole time, but I mean, even still, it just, oh boy,
They're
something's
too
up with these
predictable. They
guys.
don't have threats. They don't have any teeth. Like, especially when a guy like Allen is out, they just don't have any teeth. And you watch, especially after all the tape they put up of last year with Austin Eckler, 99th percentile outcome, just carrying them through so many stretches, 20 touchdowns from scrimmage. They were overly dependent on him last year, and the looks that he was winning on last year, the defense had a whole year to study. And I'm not saying like Eckler's just toast now because they figured him out, but when Herbert's hurt and Allen is missing, and now Rashawn Slater's out for the year, whatever, like there's a lot working against him, and defenses are more prepared than ever to deal with him. So Eckler's going to be some version of fine. I mean, he's still an awesome player, and in PPR, they all it takes is one garbage time drive against prevent defense for him to all of a sudden get 10 points.
Yep.
So that's going to be fine. But as far as paying off as like a top 5, 6 kind of pick that you just occasionally see him go at, I don't know how that's happening because a lot of not that this is anything to do with his ADP in the offseason, but a lot of people who think whatever they do about the Chargers, developed whatever ideal about the Chargers that they have over the last 2 years. It contains the premise that, well, Brandon Staley's a smart coach and they're going to figure out all this stuff that other teams can't. And so far, it's been the exact opposite. He has not been good, and he has innovated in ways to blow it that other bad coaches could never conceive. So I don't know why it should I don't know why there should be a bottom anytime soon, really. I don't know why. Like, there's this enduring faith in them as an institution just because of Staley being there that, like, oh, well, they'll get it together, though. It's like, why? What do they do well? Nothing.
No, they really don't.
Bosa and Mac. That's the only thing good with them and Derwin.
Bosa's not playing this week. Is that right?
I guess I'll have to pull up the injury report because I missed that one. But yeah, if Bosa's out, that's a huge deal. It's him and Mac.
He's on IR now.
Oh God. Yeah, they suck. They're like they're worse than the Texans now.
Oh, so do we hold our nose and pick the Texans to cover?
I'll do it. I mean, that tells you that the Chargers are golden, but I'll do it.
The onions call on this podcast. We love it. All right, let's stick in the AFC South. We got Colts hosting the Titans. The Titans got off the ropes last week and avoided the dreaded 0-3 start. Gave that over to the Raiders, of course. And that was one of those games that, like, right when it kicked off, I was like, I am so on the wrong side of this one. But my argument, I try to like craft an argument on both sides to see how a team is going to cover or not. And with the Titans, is like we have 2 weeks going into last weekend of just dreadful play. I mean, the Bills one slightly forgivable, losing to the Giants the way they did, slightly less so. So they go into that game 0-2. They're at home, and it's like, well, they should lose this game. Like, all evidence points to them being a terrible team, but Mike Vrabel is pretty good. He gets that team to play hard, and McDaniels, he might not be good, Jim. So that ended up being the case. That ended up being the right answer. The Raiders, once again, no showed for part of the game. Mac Hollins became a thing briefly. I'll have to ask you if we see that continuing in any form or fashion. But when it comes down to this matchup for Tennessee going into Indy, who obviously in their own right got one of the shocking results of last week, beating the Chiefs, who just kind of sleptwalked, I felt like, for a lot of that game.
Yeah.
So that was tough, maybe for me personally in Survivor. Still kicking myself there. But in the end, where are you on this particular matchup?
Yeah, there's like 3 good teams in the NFL, and all of the ones we were just going through, Chiefs aside, are terrible. I really fell for the McDaniels thing. He still cannot be trusted with anything, apparently. And given how things went out in Denver, it seems like that we're going to enter an alienation phase now, where things get even worse with him because he probably can't keep a contentious locker room in order. He's never been the kind of person who inspires, followers or anything. So anyway, I only mentioned that backtrack to say I still think Tennessee is bad, and I certainly still think the Colts are bad. And I think the Titans win this just because I don't think the Colts are hardly like a real team right now. They have a lot of politics going on in the background, I would imagine too. Like Chris Ballard is no doubt laying uh laying the foundation to eventually bury Reich when there's a media scapegoat to be issued at the end of the year or in a couple weeks. Who knows? Maybe this week. There's Ballard is working to undermine Reich, and normally those two work really closely together. Like Reich gets leaned on by Ballard in the game planning and stuff like that. So it's like a weird situation at the very least that they're in, and that's not even getting to the part of how their team sucks because their quarterback, whatever. I think their offensive theory makes no sense. There was a certain way it could have gone that made sense to me, and they've done actually the quite direct opposite of it. So I don't think they have the ammo to get it done on offense, and their defense. I mean, I guess they've been good against the run all year, and that's something that could continue. But the defense last week tricked the Chiefs basically because they showed 3 weeks of the same cover 3 scheme that Gus Bradley has for his entire career, the defensive coordinator of the Colts. He's run this cover 3 thing that he copied Pete Carroll back when they were running cover 3 with the Legion of Boom, and it worked at the time. And Gus Bradley's just kind of been jamming those same buttons ever since, just trying to make the same playbook work the way it did 15 years ago or whatever. And it doesn't work. The Chiefs, I think, went into that game thinking like, "Oh hell yeah, we got Bradley's cover 3. We're gonna kick his ass up and down the field." And they got out there and they ran something totally different. Like I guess they're running more like a cover 4 kind of thing, and it basically threw off the Chiefs' offense for a half or more of the game. And they didn't figure things out until like too little, too late, and then Kelsey missing that one throw, and that's how you do it. That's how you blow that game when you're the Chiefs. Not being able to run the ball at all helps too. But I mentioned all that to say the Colts kind of pulled out every stop basically last week, and they had luck in their favor too. I don't think like they could be lucky here, but I feel like it's more this time around. Like they need that luck to just not get choked out in the fourth quarter. Like I think the Titans have the personnel to deal with everything that the Colts throw at. As long as they, easier said than done. As long as they don't let Taylor kill them. I don't know
Mhm.
what the Colts have a single bit otherwise.
Yeah, I don't either. So this is one of a couple games, and we're about to get to another one where you feel queasy backing either side. But I think I'll take the side that's getting the points here, and that's Tennessee. Onward to Bears Giants. I wrote in my article this week that this might be the grossest matchup of 2-1 teams that I can remember.
Yeah, it's quite fraudulent. Their cumulative record, especially the Bears, but not to skip how bad the Giants are too. I mean, they're just weird, and they're kind of they're in this weird position where they're trying to win. The players and the coaches are trying to win, but they're also like they're behaving personnel wise. They're utilizing their personnel almost as a tanking team would, like giving starting snaps to David Sills. So that's something you do when you are not trying to win. It's like what the Bears do with Dante Pettis and all that. So
Mhm.
Equinemius St. Brown. It's like this is what you do when
Spider-Man
you are not.
meme.
Yeah, it's like the Bears are actually trying not to win, whereas the Giants are trying to win but using personnel as if they aren't. I don't know. It's weird. Uh, Makes for a volatile projection, I think. Aside from the downward offensive trend, like that's a given with these two stupid teams. But specifics aside from that, I don't know. It might be kind of a weird, whatever way it goes. It might be a weird game rather than just an ugly run out the clock, cloud of dust kind of thing. There might be some turnovers, I guess. That's probably not a bold prediction. Um, I think the Giants win somehow, probably by some amount of scoreboard comfort, but it might be because of like two, like Xavier McKinney scoring a touchdown or something like that gets them there.
So with Shepard being out, and Kenny Galladay just seeming, I still think Kenny Galladay can be a good player, or at least like
Yeah,
I
they
think he
handle that
was. But
totally wrong. Like yeah,
yeah,
let's just say he's a bit of a head case. Fine. Some people are head cases. Some people need to be coddled a little bit. But one thing you don't do, one thing that doesn't help a guy like him play right is screw with his practice reps and do this like Cold War through the media. It's like
Mm.
every time they talk face to face, they're like, "Yeah, we think Kenny's doing great," and Kenny's like, "Yeah, they tell me I'm doing fine or whatever." And then you get these anonymous reports in the media. You get Dable going up to the press and being like, "Yeah, he's got to show us more." It's like, why didn't you just tell him that?
Mm.
Why does he not? Why is he learning this now? And also, like, he's gonna get the yips over this. He's gonna develop a complex because, yeah, he's probably a bit of a head case, and when head cases are a little more fragile psychologically sometimes, and you don't you don't just like boot camp them into something different. Like, you got to kind of deal with their eccentricities. And I think Galladay is a guy who, it's like, if you don't give him those first team practice reps and you make him spend all that time sitting on the sideline about how he doesn't want to be here and how he doesn't feel like he can trust anyone here, like these people aren't on his side, he is going to get into the game the few times you put him out there, and he's gonna have the yips, and he's not gonna be focused, and he's gonna be trying to. I see people saying like he's just not even trying. He's trying to shave points. And it's like, no, he's probably just a little bit weird and needs to be coddled a little bit. And if they had coddled him, they'd have more production to show for it. But they took the principled stand of like, no, you gotta be more like David Sills because he's so helpful.
Right. Sure is. So, I mean, does Kenny G wake up,
I bet it's a
in
similar
light of
thing with
this? Like,
Tony too. It's a
mhm.
similar thing with Tony. So I don't think it's. I think they're neither of them is likely to contribute. David Sills, of course, won't do anything useful. It's just Barkley. Like, what Barkley does,
Yeah.
that's what happened that week.
Yeah,
And
pretty
Richie
pretty
James
much.
apparently.
Yes. We're Richie James guys back from
Yeah, good for him though. I mean, that's
college
kind of
football
cool.
DFS. Yeah, that rocks. And then will the Bears throw more than 20 passes this week or at any time this season?
uh, this is kind of like asking if someone will successfully take Luke Getsy hostage at gunpoint without Getsy being able to tell anyone during the game. Uh, like, if they throw 25 passes, like, does someone go see if Luke's okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, is Luke up there? Are we sure he's at his headset and there's not like a
He's
imposter?
like a body double, yeah.
Yeah, a guy wearing a Luke Getsy suit. But yeah, I think the Bears are really they're like, again, they're doing kind of what the Giants are with tank personnel, and they're really sticking with it. They're really trying to make it as ugly and dreary as possible, and they're still accidentally winning, which is of course funny and what they deserve. Um,
Yes.
but when you don't want to win, that's when you deserve to win, or if you're the Bears anyway. So yeah, they I don't see how they you know accidentally win 3 games in the first 4 weeks. So that's the Giants. Just they're going to take it somehow, I think. And I don't know what does this Bears offense even have going for it when Khalil Herbert doesn't have a 40-yard carry. It's like there's just nothing else. If Khalil
Mhm.
Herbert's averaging 4.5 yards a carry instead of 10, I don't even know how they reliably get past midfield.
Yeah, no, so that being big play dependent and run dependent, like that bad equation there. Like, go back to the drawing board. Let's see here. Let's keep it going. We got Jags, Eagles. Really interesting game. Eagles 6.5 point favorites in this one, playing host to the Jaguars. I like the Eagles in this spot. I think I'm just going to continue to back them. They continue to feel like the best team in the NFC in my estimation. This line was at 7, now it's at 6.5. Your thoughts here? I know the Jaguars deserve plenty of credit for their start. We'll obviously get there, but I think at the end of the day, the Eagles are just better.
Yeah, I think the Jaguars are interesting and whatever else, but the Eagles just are one of the best teams in the league, and I think some of the problems that the Washington offense posed to the Jaguars defense, like namely making them play spread defense, basically, that's something the Eagles can pose too for a slightly different. Not because they have like the 3 wide of Dotson, McLaurin, Curtis Samuel. They only really have like a 2 wide kind of thing. But the Hurts rushing element puts that additional like axis of tension on the defense, and I think creates the same fundamental like struggle for the Jaguars defense, which is the more that they have to spread out and more field they have to defend, the less good they are. Whereas when they can kind of tee off on you, then you're in trouble because they got some guys who can run a little bit in the front seven. But when they got the 3 wide, 4 wide from Washington, they just got annihilated in week 1. So maybe they're a little better at that by now, but not much reason to assume. And until you get a defense, what is it going to take? I guess a Bills kind of defense is what you'd need to counter this Eagles offense right now. And the Jags don't have that. So meanwhile, on their offensive side, I don't know. I'm a little bit worried about. I mean, Slay and Bradbury, of course, are very good. Slay, it'll be interesting to see if they have him shadow Christian Kirk into the slot. I know last year they generally kept Slay outside. They're going to have him follow Kirk into the slot to have him follow Kirk. So that would be interesting, both because it'll be interesting to see if Kirk can just win against a guy like that, and it'll be interesting to see if Slay loses something going into the slot as opposed to playing the perimeter. But this has to be a game where like ETN and Robinson get going if the Jaguars. It has to be a game where ETN gets going if the Jaguars are going to compete because Robinson's kind of like a constant, and they're going to need something extra that they haven't shown. You know, those 2 touchdown catches that ETN almost had in week 1. That's what they need here.
Yes, and no guarantee there, but I mean,
Those
ETN.
linebackers can't defend those guys. That's the one thing about the Eagles defense. Like, and they don't have corner depth. That their starting base loadout is really, really tough. The front 4 is really tough. The secondary is really tough. But their third corner, fourth corner, that's where they're vulnerable. And those linebackers, if you get them spaced out in coverage, they're sitting ducks basically.
Okay, so any like obviously, I think if you drafted ETN, you're still starting him at this point. But like, do you think that this is a spot to go contrarian with him in like DFS or?
Yeah, because I know people want to make like stone tablet verdicts of guys' entire careers based on 3 or 4 games. The tilting
Well,
that
yeah.
we go through. It's like ETN. I picked ETN, and he hasn't gone off in the first 3 weeks. Oh God, he must suck. He's why my life sucks. But no, it's like we went through this with Swift last year, and especially after those 2 missed touchdowns in week 1 and with Robinson being the kind of guy that he is, you can understand why Doug Peterson is sort of just like going with what he perceives as safe when in their base functions, right? And while that's occurring, I still think it can work for ETN because he can make the big play, and the big play hasn't been there the last 2 weeks in the yardage from scrimmage. And in week 1, he missed what would have been a successful setup for those 2 touchdowns. If he had those 2 touchdowns, the public perception of ETN is just kind of even with these 2 slow weeks since people would still be like, oh, but he's so close. He's it's going to happen. It's almost here. People would have a totally different view of ETN, and Doug Peterson probably would trust him a little bit too, more too, because he'd probably been like more likely to give ETN that 50-yard touchdown carry that Robinson had. It's like that's a play that ETN will clearly make and much faster than Robinson. And if he had 2 touchdown catches in week 1, maybe ETN would have been out there instead. These are narrow paths that he's working with, which is at once frustrating in the meantime, but it's also reason to believe it doesn't take much for it to go the other way. He only really needs those 1 or 2 plays, and he's a better candidate to make those 1 or 2 plays than almost any running back in the league or in recent memory. So I think he's clearly stick with ETN still. By the way, he's been very productive as a route runner. They just kind of haven't gotten the volume going yet, but you just see it both with the way he is and the pass catching usage. It's almost there. And you had a similar souring on DeAndre Swift to start last year. He dropped that touchdown pass against the Bears or whatever in week 1, and then he kind of got nicked up and he missed a few games. Jamal Williams took a couple touchdowns, and people are like, "Oh God, DeAndre Swift's a fraud. He's never going to be any good." And then 4 big games in the second half of the year had people change their mind from that to we got to take him in the top 12 in 2022. So just understand it can change in a hurry with ETN.
No, absolutely. I think that his best days are obviously ahead of him. And then last one for you. Are you starting Trevor Lawrence this week? And if not, is this the last week that you would say that you're not starting Trevor Lawrence?
I think it's a tough matchup for him, but they've been throwing a lot. They've had a Doug Peterson has had a pretty specific game plan about throwing a lot and throwing underneath, and eventually teams are going to have to readjust to that. And if Gannon's on it, and if Slay and Bradbury are on it, it could be a harsh reckoning to face in this game if they try to do those same routes and they're getting jumped. So I'm a little concerned for Lawrence, but he could throw like 40 passes in this game.
Well, yeah, I mean that would obviously help goose the overall fantasy production from him. 40 dropbacks, but yeah, I think if you see that Trevor Lawrence has had to throw it 40 times, you can't imagine that the game went
I think
particularly
this is a
well.
tough game for him over, and that front four it's not easy to deal with.
Yeah, those guys are monsters up there. Let's go Steelers, Jets. Expectation here that Zach Wilson should be back, so that our Flacco days, those short-lived, were, the candle that burns twice as bright, burns twice as quickly. Unfortunately, as such is 2022 Joe Flacco on the Jets. Going into Pittsburgh, I'm just kind of starting to recognize how shaky they are in general. Even with TJ Watt being out, the defense, you called it perfectly last week when it came to that Thursday night game against the Browns. Like, eventually, this run defense isn't going to be able to hold up, that type of thing. But I mean, I don't know if the Jets are built to kind of really take complete advantage of the weaknesses that the Steelers have right now. So I do like the Steelers in this spot, but I don't feel great about backing them in any week right now.
Yeah, I don't know how to call this one. I guess I'll take the Steelers just because I don't know, Tomlin is their coach.
Yep, and Robert Salah, the coach of the Jets. So yeah, not a whole lot else to unpack from that one. Before we get on over to our next game, football is officially back on Monkey Knife Fight with all the NFL action you're looking for. And if college football is more your speed, they've got plenty of that. On Monkey Knife Fight, there's no sharks, no salary caps, and no math. It's just easy to play, easy to win, daily fantasy player props. Join now at monkeyknifefight.com and you'll get your first game free. Then use promo code RWNFL to get your first deposit matched instantly up to $100. So what are you waiting for? Join Monkey Knife Fight today. Again, that's promo code RWNFL. All right, on to the afternoon slate of games here. Cards, Panthers. Panthers at home in this one. This this last block of games has just been a brutal collection of matchups. I think I like the Panthers in this spot, though.
Yeah, why not? Some idiot team has to win this one. Why not them?
I mean, the Cardinals are just.
I hate that. Kime and Cliff, you guys gotta go hang out somewhere else. I don't know. Get an island for each other somewhere.
It's anything but what we're seeing right now. Let's go. Packers, Patriots. Packers at home. This line obviously has changed a good bit in light of the Mac Jones.
Specifically, that one picture. There's like the Wire report about like Mac Jones parentheses ankle. I'm like, oh my god, we gotta change the line. And then they saw the psychic, just the
grimace heard around the world
in his face. Yeah, and it's like, wait, this is something more. This will have repercussions that spread outward. I don't know what to make of that. I mean, I think in a way they don't lose that much just because. Not that I'm saying Jones is not better than Hoyer or Bailey Zapp or whatever, but they weren't getting that much from the quarterback position. So it's not a high bar situation, but the Patriots. I don't know what their offense sucked in the first place. I don't know why they would keep it together here outside of the ground game. Like the ground game will give them a certain sort of constant, but I think Rodgers gets enough going that the Packers pull away, even if it's in the late part of the game.
My thinking was just kind of like, especially when the line was closer to 10.5, that I'm not going to trust the Packers with that much against Bill Belichick. But now it's 9.5, and I can a 10-point win is a lot easier to conceptualize than 13 against Belichick. So if the line sticks at 9.5, I'm on the Packers somewhat begrudgingly, but 10 and above. I think is where and obviously that's why they make the line the way that they do. But
I'm thinking a little bit too much in like wide receiver corner matchups, but I think Rodgers could have a really good game here. By the way, I think Romeo Doubs is for real.
Yes.
I think his arrival was needlessly delayed by the GM Gutekunst or whatever, sticking his hands in the offense and saying you got to start Christian Watson even though he sucks and hasn't practiced in like 4 months. Dobbs should have been their lead snap guy along with Watkins right away, and he proved it last week. I don't think they can go back. And in this particular game, you might see a lot of Alan Lazard against Miles Bryant, who is the new Dante Dion, like I've mentioned previously. Like he won't be in the league soon, so target the receivers who run against him now.
So okay, well those are good points there when it comes to this secondary there for New England.
Sorry, before I forget, I want to say the one thing about the Packers that is not going to improve, and they need to stop doing it, is the two-back offense. Like, I know it's good in theory or whatever, but the results haven't been there, and it makes sense that the results wouldn't be there because the defense counters with nickel, and then Aaron Jones is not a plus blocker on this rep, so you get the same result as if you were just running with like a receiver who is not actually a threat to. Jones can run a route, but not like any qualified receiver should be able to. So they just make themselves worse, and the results say that too.
Good, yeah, okay. So that it looks cool on the field when they have AJ Dillon and Jones back there, but I think that's a good point about the actual effectiveness of that type of personnel. Let's go Broncos, Raiders. Raiders 2.5 point favorites in this one at home in Vegas. I mean, it's another game. You hate backing either of them.
Well, Crackshot said that the Broncos would beat the 49ers, so I believe whatever he says about this game.
Good
whoever
point.
He's picking. Yeah, I to be serious, don't know. Both of these teams are really in rough shape. I don't. I guess the Broncos at least have Javonte Williams they can lean on, and Sutton, making a couple moss grabs a game, but it's a lot of like 8 on 11, 8 on 10, 7 on 9 kind of football, just trash, and then stupid coaches making it all worse.
Yeah, and then on the Raiders side, anything set up nicely for them offensively.
I mean, Jacobs is playing pretty well, so if they can have the focus and game script necessary to feed him a little bit, I don't want to like say Jacobs can't step up a little. The Mac Hollins thing is not going to go. That's one of those things, one of those box scores that people look at and they're like, oh wow, that guy's emerging. This is something new from this Mac Hollins guy. He might be the real deal. It's like, no, that box score tells you that the Raiders lost. That's the Raiders offense getting put in a place it doesn't want to go. If they're featuring Mac Hollins as their lead receiver, they got whooped. It's simple as that. So granted, they can lose against anybody apparently, but the Hollins thing is not like an enduring design, even if Renfro misses time. Like they want those plays to go to Waller, couldn't find a way to do it, got whooped for it.
Yeah, and then Adams coming off of a couple of kind of disappointing weeks for fantasy. The target volume's been there. Do you think the efficiency climbs back up to norms this week?
Yeah, I think he'll be fine. I just think it is going to be by the end of the year a bit of a slog with him, where it's like he has. God, I don't know what the math it needs to work out like, but like getting like 11, 12 targets a game, 7.2 yards a target, only 6 or 7 touchdowns. Like he's gonna have games where he's getting like 11 catches for 85 yards and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think so too. So, he was kind of my late first round target this year in drafts where I was picking there. Not feeling great.
I think he'll be fine, but I think we knew we were getting into that with PPR. It's like as long as it's PPR, it's like, hey, it's probably not going to be great in real life, but 100 catches is 100 catches, and some of these first round picks are going to just be total duds.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's just kind of how the game works.
We would like a prime Cooper Kupp, yes, but apparently they're just not giving those away.
It's unbelievable. Let's go Sunday night matchup. Chiefs, Bucks. I hadn't seen the latest as for whether this game is staying in Tampa Bay or not. But the Chiefs slight road underdogs in this one against the Bucks. To me, that feels a little bit overreaction to last week. I think that the Buccaneers have a severely flawed offense, and I feel like the Chiefs simply do not. So, I mean, weather permitting, this game, I just like the Chiefs in this particular spot. Where are you with this one?
It's tough to think through because there was that one time when they had Tyreek and the Chiefs showed up and just put like 270 yards on in one half with Tyreek
Mm-hmm.
Hill, and then in the second half and in the subsequent matchup, Todd Bowles called a much better game. So Todd Bowles, he he's kind of familiar. He's paid a lot of attention to this team despite not playing against them that much, despite being, far apart. So I think he's ready to show up with a good game plan. And I think the Chiefs are playing a lot of 10 on 11. So I don't know if this is the team where they get away with that. Granted, I guess they wouldn't be running very well even if they gave the ball to Pacheco or Ronald Jones, whoever it is that can run the ball, in light of McKinnon not being able to do anything of any kind. But as long as they're paying that 10 on 11, they're just kind of asking for bad luck. It's like bad luck shows up more often when you're letting yourself be nearer to it in the first place. So they make things needlessly close on themselves. They give themselves a needlessly tight margin of error as long as they do that. And you're correct to point out that the Buccaneers offense is all busted, but it's pretty much all because of injury, I think. And Tom Brady, when he has the time and the means, figures things out. And getting Julio back in practice, getting Godwin back in practice, Russell Gage is practicing the first day of the week this week. That might mark the receivers being substantially better than they've been in 2 weeks at least.
Mm-hmm.
And the offensive line is still a problem, but and not to dismiss that because the Chiefs defense is better, I think, than people realize. Like they got some people, they got like Carlos Dunlap playing off the bench now. So you've got ammo when you got a player like Dunlap off the bench going against a backup busted offensive line. They could do some real damage. So yeah, I guess I don't think the Buccaneers want to just like air it out exactly. I think they want to be more selective with the shots that they take, but I think they might start making more of their shots than they have in a couple weeks.
Okay, that's an interesting point. Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't expect their offense to continue to just kind of mire, but at the same time, it's been a slow start, but I think point
Brady
well
always
taken.
gets to working on things. It's like there'll be a game where you're like, "Oh man, Brady's just whooped," but like it just doesn't happen the same way the second time.
Yeah, he never stays down. Can't get rid of him. And then let's see here. And then is there a Chiefs
Unless you're his
receiver?
wife.
If you're a Chiefs receiver investor for say the Sunday night showdown slate, who's the one to go with?
Juju, but I mean like if I could know what kind of coverage, if I knew where the Buccaneers might have busted coverage and where Marquez Valdez Scantling is lining up on that play, he can exploit busted coverage. I just don't know if he can beat anything else. Um, yeah, it's Juju, it's Kelsey, and then there's a bunch of like trick shot guys.
Is Sky Moore going to do anything this year?
If they had to give him like 35, 40 snaps in a game, I bet he would do something, but I don't think that's on the table. At least not when Valdez Scantling and Hardman are healthy. Hardman, I guess, is not healthy. I don't know what the heel. He wasn't practicing Wednesday. I don't know how bad that is, or if it's like they're managing it. But I mean, I like Michael Hardman obviously, but I don't like the idea of injured Hardman. So, Justin Watson's in the way probably too. Yeah, I guess Moore's just he's redshirting pretty much.
Yeah, yeah, I kind of think so as well. And then last game quickly, we'll go Rams, Niners. Niners slight home favorites in this one in the Monday night game. I know I was surprised to see that as well, but the Rams they've won 2 games in a row, but they've let worse teams hang around
It's been
for
ugly,
in each
yeah.
of those matchups.
Yeah, I don't think the Rams have figured out anything really. I mean, they were unable to get Allen Robinson going in a game when Cooper Kupp. The only difficult matchup for Kupp in the league is Arizona for some reason. Byron Murphy apparently, and even with that pressure against Kupp, they still couldn't get Robinson going at all. So there's a lot of dust on this offense, the way I see it, and I don't. McVay might be one smart coach or whatever, but I don't think you can only polish a turd so much, and I
Hmm.
think we are at maximum polish with this one. On the San Francisco side, it's more like they got more to work with. I just apparently can't trust them to do anything other than play pretty good defense anyway. So that
Yeah.
though is the point. I think that if necessary, D'Amico Ryans just grabs the steering wheel from Shanahan and just says like I'm winning this one.
Yeah, so I think that Yeah, defense is going to kind of end up being the name of the game in this one, and one that, yeah, begrudgingly, I do like the Niners to find a way. I think they've had some success against McVay and the Rams in the past, better McVay Rams teams than this one even. So that's going to round it out for us here on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, the Thursday edition, the breakdown of the entire slate. Make sure you check in on Friday's episode. Ryan Belangi and Scott Genstad breaking down the DFS. Must listen every week if you're playing DFS. Really good stuff from those guys. And of course, we've got pods going all week long, Monday through Friday. So make sure you're checking those out. That's going to do it for us here. For Mario Puig, I'm John McKechnie. Thanks for listening.
Try RotoWire today, free for 10 days. Get our premium tools, rankings, analysis, and breaking news alerts. No credit card required. Go to rotowire.com/